Welcome to Troublemakers Smoke Signals. This is a segment of Troublemakers, the podcast, where we talk about current events, discourses, things that are happening in the world, and we try to bring a critical or conscious perspective to them. So the other day, our producer, Rogers, asked me, have you seen the new Snow White film? And I told him very proudly, no, I didn't. I have no interest in watching that. But it got us talking, and the discourse that has come between liberals and conservatives, or self-identifying liberals and self-identifying conservatives in the U.S. Since this film has been out, to me, that's like a very interesting cultural phenomenon. And I want to kind of package liberals and conservatives in this debate as sort of one relatively homogenous, culturally homogenous unit, and try to kind of maybe bring in a different perspective of critique from the left of that. So you had the Brothers Grimm, German traditional folklore writers, make the original Snow White fairy tale and many other fairy tales. Their whole shtick, their whole drive, was to archive, to protect, to advance traditional German folklore. So they had like this, looking at it now, it seems like they had this kind of motivation for homogenizing, or for relatively culturally homogenous kind of like motivation. So what does Disney do with these things? Like any corporation, they take this and commodify it as a product. So in 1937, they make this supposedly groundbreaking animated, feature film Snow White, but they don't, lift it from the pages of the Brothers Grimm's version per se. They find the zeitgeists of their time. They find, for example, the domestic goddess that Snow White is. They find the very colonizing kind of nature that she has toward the dwarfs and keeping a house, and that's that whole kind of like housewife era kind of thing. You have like feudal society. You have these different things that at the time like must have resonated with a potential audience. And so Disney, as storytellers, understood this, but also as capitalists knew that they needed to commodify certain things to get people to the screen, to watch it in the first place. So, and maybe some of the writers were less conscious of certain things and others were more conscious of some things. And as they made the film, maybe these were questions for them. But the fact is, regardless of where people landed on issues of race or gender or something like that at the time, they're asking who are the people with the money and how can we get them to the theaters so that we also make money. So almost a century later, they make a remake of the film, and their company is now worth almost $200 billion. So like any corporation, the shareholders are going to figure out, how do we take this money and turn it into more money? Well, they failed on this particular project because the film cost over $200 million. Box office sales around the world were pretty 50-50 between the U.S. and the rest of the world, so they made back less than half of what they invested. But this is just a drop in the bucket for a massively wealthy corporation, and like any corporation, some of your products flop. You determine like how to take risks with your products that you send to the market. So what they did with this film is not edgy in any respect because, they're taking the conversations of our times and figuring out not what does Disney think about this. This is not the question. They're just taking whatever conversations we are all having, we who may be the consumers of this product, and they are gonna find out how can we commodify this zeitgeist, put it in to our film. And wherever you fall on the spectrum, if you're a super racist person, you're likely to see this film because you've been arguing about the things that have come up that maybe Rachel Zegler has said or what have you. If you're very anti-racist, if you're liberal and into identity politics conversations, you're likely to see this for more or less the same reasons, right? We're all going to see the movie. So nobody is, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but few people seem to be stepping back and asking the question, should Disney be the driving force in our lives and the lives of our children that help us understand narrative and story? should, or even film itself, or even animated film in particular. Is this really what we want? Can we be looking for something better? Is it inevitable? Is it a must that we subscribe to, Netflix, Prime, etc.? Are there, alternative ways to like maybe create or enjoy film, cartoons, animations, live action, CGI? Maybe there are other ways to do this apart from having a falsely polarized debate around a single corporation. Now, the question is, that helps us explore this, why is it that we are at the Disney table, or pretending to be at the Disney table, because we know we're also not welcome there. We're only welcome there as consumers. And why are we debating amongst ourselves about what Disney should be? And I think that question reveals something quite, I would say, unique about American society and the relationship between state and capital and corporations and branding and marketing. It's probably best studied in the U.S. more than anywhere else, especially from the late 19th century onward, especially through the 20th century. So, you have people that will buy either Nike or Adidas, and then you have these kind of cliques that form around, are you a Nike person or an Adidas person? Why must I be one or the other? And few people step back to question that. Sometimes subcultures form, like, you had the grunge subculture, punk, these different subcultures form which do question these things. But, to gain a foothold in kind of like mainstream social change, the history of social changes, is really quite difficult, for a subculture to do. It takes time and it takes power, and money is power, right? So these corporations do want us asking questions about our American identities, right? They do want us asking those questions in the context of what product they have to offer us, and I think it's important for us to be able to detect that when we find ourselves, debating like, which restaurant we love, which chain restaurant do we love more than the other. The interesting thing about Americana, and sort of industry branding and art, and design and these kind of things, is that somehow we have held together the corporate icon image, but we sort of, we package it in this almost like ahistorical, non-existent, fictitious world of like the mom and pop store. And it's not to, of course, depreciate the value of those like small cities and towns that are trying to, bolster a walkable downtown and like, do tax cuts for small business and that kind of thing. Those things do exist in a way, but certainly not at the, like, Americana kind of blends that whole world together with things like Disney or Nike or, pick a corporation. So we have this kind of mythology in our understanding of culture, where we're very unconscious of how corporations have like really seeped into who we are, and I think that's the first, like, to me, an interesting discussion on Snow White is one where whoever is talking about it has first dissected what is Disney, or what is film and TV distribution, what is the industry like. If they've gone through that process of dissecting that, deconstructing that, then I really want to understand, like, okay, now what can we say about this film? So look at these things in Snow White that Disney has managed to commodify. Identity politics. Wherever you stand on that spectrum, you may go to the box office because of where you stand on that spectrum. And you're like, and they know that about this current false polarization between, liberals and conservatives in the U.S., or maybe it's a true polarization, but only within kind of a certain spectrum of society and politics and our understanding of it, which I think is like a very, very limited window on kind of like a global, from a global perspective. But they have managed to commodify the identity politics. They've also managed to commodify things that seem so ironic and impossible to commodify, like peasant bandit society. So, if you have a supposed, former president, you have a peasant revolutionary who meets, this kind of princess who fell into some kind of problems, they are trying to kind of tell a story about peasant bandit society. Peasant bandit society is so interesting because it's kind of it's what Eric Hobsbawm, who is a Marxist historian, called kind of like a pre-political form of political organizing, where you had people who were conscious enough to know that like the rich were wealthy at the expense of the rest of us. And therefore, it is ethical and right to steal from them and redistribute that money amongst, the peasant class. So this is something that, its whole being is almost like anti-commodifiable, but they've turned it into a story. This is the product that Disney sells us, as stories, right? So they've commodified this peasant bandit society, and they've made it something that interests us, so that we will come and watch this. And, this isn't something that the Brothers Grimm and their fairy tales were trying to do. They just realized that in the U.S., we are talking about, whatever the 24-hour news cycle gives us, so Biden versus Trump. Never mind that their economic policies are more alike each other than they are different. They're all pro-corporation, pro-military, so there are maybe important differences between like the two administrations, to use that example, but the fact is we are all arguing about it, and we are being inflamed by the 24-hour news cycle, and our identities are really into this thing. So if they put something in that Snow White film that reminds us of this conversation, we're more likely to show up at the box office. It seems more in the zeitgeists of the times. So let's be careful to assume that like Disney would care at all, to do anything that's edgy or trying to make cultural change or anything like that. They're just trying to sell us a product. So if we can dissect that, then that's the prerequisite, I think, to having a conversation about Snow White.